She stole a kiss from the Korean Mafia boss at his engagement party and uncovered a murderous betrayal. Jada Knox had exactly 4 seconds to choose between 3 terrible options. She could pretend she hadn't just decoded the encrypted message on the discarded phone in the women's restroom. She could walk back into the glittering ballroom of the Shilla Hotel, serve champagne to Seoul's most dangerous men, collect her paycheck, and go home to her small apartment in Itaewon. She could stay invisible, the way she'd promised herself she would after escaping to Korea 6 months ago. Or she could save a man's life and destroy her own in the process. Through the ornate doorway, she could see Lee Do-hyun standing on the raised platform, his hand resting formally on his fiancée's waist. Even from this distance, Jada recognized the studied neutrality in his posture. The way his tailored suit couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. The tattoos that crept above his collar told a story his expensive clothes tried to conceal. This was a man who had clawed his way up from nothing and remained ready to defend everything. 3 seconds. The message was explicit. Phase 3 initiates during the toast. Medical emergency narrative. Assets secured by morning. His fiancée, the porcelain-perfect Minnesio in her white lace gown, was planning to poison him tonight. And judging by the men positioned at every exit wearing identical lapel pins, she'd already purchased the loyalty of half his security team. 2 seconds. Jada's hands trembled as she gripped the phone. She'd spent 6 months learning to be no one, to take up no space, to never again let her choices impact someone else's fate. After Marcus, after the gaslighting and the isolation and the systematic dismantling of her identity, she'd sworn she would never again insert herself into situations that weren't her business. But this was murder. Premeditated, calculated murder. 1 second. She burst through the ballroom doors. 200 faces turned toward her, the uninvited disruption in server's attire. Do-hyun's security detail moved instantly, hands reaching for concealed weapons. But Jada was already moving, her heels clicking against marble as she crossed the distance between irrelevance and infamy. "I'm so sorry," she said loudly in Korean, her accent obvious but her words clear. "I'm such a fan, and I couldn't help myself." And then Jada Knox, who had spent half a year making herself invisible, kissed the most dangerous man in Seoul in front of his fiancée, his enemies, and his empire. The room exploded into chaos. Crystal shattered. Chairs scraped. Men shouted in Korean and English. But Jada had already pressed the phone into Do-hyun's palm, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "Check the messages. Your fiancé is going to kill you in the next 10 minutes. When she pulled back, she expected rage. Violence. The immediate consequences of her astronomical miscalculation. Instead, Lee Do-hyun looked at her with eyes that had seen every betrayal the world had to offer. Except, perhaps, this one honest act from a stranger. He held her gaze for 3 heartbeats while security closed in around them. Then he glanced down at the phone, his thumb moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. His expression never changed. But his fiancée must have seen something shift, because Minnesio's perfect smile finally cracked. "Do-hyun, she began, her voice honey-sweet with concern. "This woman is clearly disturbed. Everyone out." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Except you, Minnesio. And you," he gestured to Jada, who was now being held firmly by 2 security guards. "You stay exactly where you are." As the ballroom emptied amid confused murmurs, Jada realized she had just traded invisible safety for spectacular, irreversible visibility. And standing in the center of that emptying room, watching Lee Do-hyun read the evidence of his own planned murder, she understood that her life as she knew it had just ended. The only question now was what would rise from the ashes. If you value the hard work behind these stories, hitting that subscribe button would mean so much to me. Also, before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's continue. Jada sits in Do-hyun's private office in the basement level of the hotel, a space that's elegant but unmistakably functional. Reinforced walls, no windows, a single entrance guarded by men whose hands never stray far from their waistbands. She's been here for 40 minutes, watching Do-hyun's Lieutenant Kangdae pace like a predator deciding whether she's prey or competition. "You expect us to believe," Kangdae says in precise English, his accent British inflected from years studying at Oxford, "that you just happened to find that phone? That you decoded encrypted messages in less than 5 minutes? And that your response to discovering an assassination plot was to kiss a man you'd never met?" Jada keeps her hands visible on the table, a technique she'd learned from her therapist for managing anxiety, Ground yourself in what you can control. I didn't decode anything. The messages were in English. Someone got sloppy, probably assumed everyone at a Korean engagement party would communicate in Korean. Convenient. The opposite of convenient, actually. If I'd wanted convenience, I would have walked away. Kangdae leans forward, his cologne expensive and his threat clear. Maybe you're working for Park Chong-min. Maybe this whole thing is theater. You discredit Min Seo, make yourself look like a hero, and now you're perfectly positioned to get close to. Enough. Do-hyun's voice cuts through the interrogation like a blade through silk. He's been standing by the door, so still that Jada had almost forgotten he was there. Almost. Kangdae, wait outside. Sir, we haven't established. I said outside. The lieutenant leaves, but his expression promises this conversation isn't over. When the door closes, the silence in the room becomes weighted, expectant. Do-hyun moves to the chair across from Jada, his movements precise and economical. Up close, she can see the details the ballroom lighting had softened. The scar that bisects his left eyebrow, the calluses on his knuckles that expensive manicures can't quite hide, the exhaustion around his eyes that speaks to years of vigilance. Why? He asked simply. Jada had prepared for threats, for accusations, even for violence. She hadn't prepared for genuine curiosity. Why did I interfere? Why did you risk everything for a stranger? The question lands differently than Kangdae's interrogation because it's not asking what she did, but who she is. Jada finds herself answering with more honesty than strategy. 6 months ago, I was in a relationship where I convinced myself that looking away was safer than speaking up. I told myself that what I suspected wasn't my business, that I didn't have all the information, that maybe I was wrong. By the time I trusted my instincts, I'd lost 2 years and most of myself. Do-hyun's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture, recognition maybe. So this was redemption? This was me proving I've learned the difference between minding my business and moral cowardice. A slight smile touches his mouth, there and gone so quickly Jada might have imagined it. Expensive lesson. Most important ones are. Do-hyun stands, pours 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on the side table, and sets one in front of Jada. The gesture is so unexpectedly normal that it momentarily disrupts the surreal danger of the situation. He drinks half his glass before speaking again. Min Seo confessed under pressure from her family's lawyers. They're trying to negotiate immunity in exchange for information about who bankrolled the assassination attempt. Her uncle runs the second-largest pharmaceutical company in Korea. He wanted access to my distribution networks and thought marriage was cheaper than negotiation. When I started asking too many questions about their quality control issues, elimination became more practical than partnership. The casual way he discusses his own planned murder makes Jada's stomach turn. What happens to her? That's being negotiated. But here's what matters to you, the fallout. Do-hyun sets down his glass with deliberate care. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Seoul's underworld will know what happened tonight. Some will interpret your actions as heroic. Most will interpret them as me canceling my engagement for a foreign woman I'd never met before. That makes you either my weakness or my strategy, and both interpretations make you a target. The room suddenly feels smaller. Jada's carefully rebuilt life, her anonymous translation work, her small apartment in Itaewon, her Friday evening language exchange at the cafe near Hongdae, flashes before her like something already lost. You're saying I can't go back to my life. I'm saying your life as it was ended the moment you walked through those ballroom doors. Now we deal with what that means. Do-hyun pulls out his phone, pulls up something, and slides it across the table. It's a photograph of Jada taken tonight, her face clear despite the chaos, kissing him. The image is already circulating on encrypted channels his people monitor. The comments are in Korean, but Jada understands enough to catch the gist. Who is she? Where did she come from? How much is she worth? Worth. Jada's voice sounds distant to her own ears. Kidnapping ransom. Information extraction. Leverage against me. Take your pick. Do-hyun retrieves his phone, his expression neutral. I'm offering you 2 options. First, my organization relocates you completely. New identity, new country, substantial financial support to start over. You'd be comfortable, safe, and entirely disconnected from your current life. You'd never be able to return to Seoul or contact anyone you know here. The thought of running again, of becoming someone else again, makes Jada's chest constrict. She just started remembering who she was before Marcus. And the second option? You accept my protection and stay. But staying means entering my world completely. You can't be adjacent to it. Half-in creates vulnerability. You'd live in a secure location, have constant security, and maintain the appearance of being under my protection. As what? Your mistress? Your possession? As someone I owe a debt to. Do-hyun's answer is matter-of-fact, which somehow makes it more believable than flattery would be. I don't keep possessions, Ms. Knox. People who work with me do so with clear terms and mutual benefit. You saved my life. That creates obligation. Jada studies his face, looking for the manipulation she's learned to expect from powerful men. But Do-hyun isn't performing concern or manufacturing intimacy. He's presenting a problem and potential solutions with the same directness he might use in any business negotiation. It's oddly respectful. Why would you protect me at all? You could eliminate the problem, she gestures to herself, much more efficiently. Because you did something tonight that no one in my organization would have done. You risked everything for a stranger based on principle alone. That kind of integrity is either precious or idiotic. I haven't decided which yet. He pauses, and for the first time, something almost vulnerable crosses his expression. But I don't waste it. And I don't punish people for being brave, even when their bravery is inconvenient. The words hit harder than Jada expects because they acknowledge something Marcus never did, that her choices, even risky ones, had value. She thinks about her apartment with its slowly accumulating personal touches, her Tuesday morning regular at the coffee shop who's started saving her favorite table, the life she's been carefully constructing from the debris of her last one. She thinks about running again, about explaining to no one why she disappeared, about learning to be yet another version of herself in yet another city. She thinks about the moment she walked through those ballroom doors and felt, for the first time in years, like someone who acted instead of endured. If I stay, Jada says slowly, I need it to be on my terms. I won't be hidden away or controlled. I won't be decorative or silent. If I'm going to be visible, I'm going to be visible as myself, not as some version of me you find more convenient. Do-hyun's slight smile returns, and this time it stays long enough for her to be certain she didn't imagine it. I'd expect nothing less. Convenient women don't walk into rooms full of armed criminals and kiss their way into international incidents. Is that a yes? That's an acknowledgement that you're exactly as stubborn as you are brave, and that both qualities are about to be tested extensively. He stands, offering his hand for a handshake, formal, businesslike. Welcome to the most complicated protection arrangement you'll ever regret agreeing to. Jada takes his hand, and the gesture feels less like surrender than declaration. I've survived worse. I believe you have. The question is whether you can survive better. Later, as Yoonghwa, a woman in her 30s with military posture and assessing eyes, drives Jada to what will apparently be her new temporary residence, Jada watches Seoul pass by the bulletproof windows. The city looks different now, each shadow potentially hostile, each stranger potentially cataloging her face. Marcus had taught her that power meant controlling everything, that safety required making yourself small enough to avoid attention. But tonight, she'd done the opposite. She'd made herself catastrophically visible, and somehow she'd survived. More than survived, she'd acted with integrity and walked away standing. Maybe that was its own kind of power. You should sleep, Yoonghwa says, her English accented but clear. Tomorrow, everything changes again. Again. You changed Do-hyun's plan for the first time in 5 years. His organization will react. His enemies will probe for weakness. Your presence will be interpreted and weaponized. Yoonghwa meets her eyes in the rearview mirror. The man you saved is honorable by his own code, but his world is not kind to people who draw attention. You'll need to be smarter and stronger than you've ever been. And if I'm not, then you'll learn quickly, or you'll break. Yoonghwa's expression softens slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're the former. Women who survive the kind of thing that makes them flee countries, we recognize each other. The comment hangs in the air, an offering of solidarity Jada hadn't expected. She thinks about her therapist's words from their last session. Healing isn't about becoming invulnerable. It's about learning you can be hurt and still be whole. Tonight, Jada had chosen to be hurt able, to care about a stranger's life enough to risk her own safety. And she discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting with integrity despite terror, accepting consequences rather than hiding from them, and trusting that her instincts, so long questioned and undermined, were worth following. These were lessons she couldn't have learned in safety. And as the car pulls up to a high-rise in Gangnam, its security measures discreet but omnipresent, Jada realizes that she's not being imprisoned by Do-hyun's protection. She's being given space to discover what she's capable of when she stops trying to disappear. The question is whether that discovery will save her or destroy her. 3 days after the engagement party, Jada wakes in an apartment that costs more per month than she made in a year as a translator. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the Han River, the morning light turning the water into hammered gold. The space is beautiful and impersonal, expensive furniture with no personal touches, art that's tasteful but generic, a kitchen stocked by someone who's never cooked in it. It feels like a very expensive cage. Yoonghwa arrives at 8 with coffee and a tablet. We need to discuss your security protocols. Good morning to you too. Pleasantries are for people who aren't being monitored by 3 rival organizations. Yoonghwa sets the tablet on the counter, pulling up a map dotted with red markers. These are locations you should avoid. These, she swipes to a new screen, are secure routes for necessary travel. And these are the people whose attention you've attracted. The faces on the screen range from businessmen in expensive suits to women with predatory smiles to young men with empty eyes. Yoonghwa provides brief descriptions. Park Chong-min, he runs half the real estate development in Gangnam and wants Do-hyun's import licenses. Choi Yuna, she controls most of the high-end escort services and sees you as competition for Do-hyun's attention. This one, she taps a photo of a man in his 20s with an expensive watch, is Min Seo's cousin. He blames you for his family's loss of face. Jada's coffee turns bitter on her tongue. I saved Do-hyun's life, and I'm the villain? You disrupted the established order. In this world, that's the same thing. Yoonghwa's expression isn't unkind, just realistic. Your intentions don't matter. Only consequences matter. And the consequence is that you're now a variable in everyone's calculations. The next hour covers emergency protocols, secure communication methods, and what Yoonghwa calls situational awareness training. How to identify surveillance, how to recognize pre-attack indicators, how to create exit strategies from any location. It's simultaneously paranoid and practical. And by the end, Jada feels like she's been inducted into a secret society whose membership is more curse than privilege. Can I leave? Jada asks. Actually leave, I mean. Go to a cafe, walk around, exist in public. With security, yes. But understand, your old life doesn't exist anymore. Your apartment has been visited twice by people asking questions. Your translation agency received a call threatening them if they continue employing you. Even your regular coffee shop is treating your absence as a business risk. The systematic dismantling of everything she built makes Jada's hands shake. She sets down her coffee carefully, employing the grounding techniques her therapist taught her. So I'm just supposed to stay here? A prisoner who happens to have nice furniture. You're supposed to adapt. Yoonghwa's tone shifts, becoming more personal. I know this feels like losing yourself again, but there's a difference between being controlled and being protected while you figure out your next move. Do-hyun isn't Marcus. The comparison, and the fact that Yoonghwa knows enough to make it, stops Jada cold. What did he tell you? Nothing. I'm good at reading people who've been systematically undermined. And I know the difference between a man who wants to own you and one who's trying to keep you alive while you reconstruct your boundaries. Yoonghwa collects the tablet, her expression softening. Give it time. And maybe stop seeing protection as imprisonment. They're not the same thing. After Yoonghwa leaves, Jada spends an hour testing the parameters of her new reality. She discovers she can order food, browse the internet, even schedule a call with her therapist through encrypted channels Do-hyun's people have set up. What she can't do is be anonymous. Every interaction now carries weight, visibility, potential consequence. It's exhausting and terrifying, and in a strange way clarifying. Because Marcus had made her invisible through isolation, cutting her off from friends, dismissing her career, convincing her that her presence was burdensome. But now she's aggressively visible, forced to matter whether she wants to or not. And mattering, even dangerously, feels different than disappearing. Her phone buzzes with a message from an unknown number. Samcheong Gallery. 3 p.m. We need to discuss your future. LDH. Do-hyun. The gallery is in one of Seoul's most expensive neighborhoods, a converted hanok that maintains traditional architecture while housing contemporary art. Jada arrives with Yoonghwa, who positions herself near the entrance with the casual vigilance of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Do-hyun is in the back gallery, examining a painting of a child alone in a vast field, arms raised toward an unseen sun. He doesn't turn when Jada approaches, and for a moment, she just watches him. This man whose life she saved and who's now, for better or worse, irrevocably tangled with hers. "What do you see?" he asks without looking at her. Jada studies the painting, trying to understand what he wants from the question. Isolation. Vulnerability. A child who's either been abandoned or is choosing solitude, it's hard to tell which. Look again. Now Do-hyun does turn, and his expression is intent. The posture. Arms raised, face to the sky. This isn't abandonment. This is solitude. There's a difference. What's the difference? Abandonment is done to you. Solitude is chosen. The child in this painting isn't waiting to be rescued. They're experiencing something alone that can only be experienced alone. He moves closer to the canvas, and Jada notices his fingers are stained with what looks like ink. Some people never learn that distinction. They spend their whole lives confusing being alone with being abandoned. The conversation feels like it's about more than the painting, and Jada decides to meet his indirectness with frankness. "Why am I here? If you wanted to check on me, you could have called. Because you need more than protection." Do-hyun finally looks at her directly. "You need purpose. Sitting in a luxury apartment with nothing to do except worry about threats is a specific kind of torture. I know because I've used it on people. The casual admission of psychological warfare should be alarming, but somehow it's not. Do-hyun isn't performing morality. He's being honest about who he is, which feels more respectful than comfortable lies would be. "So what are you offering?" "Actual work. My organization is transitioning, diversifying into legitimate business while maintaining necessary operations. I need someone who understands Western business culture, international negotiation, and how clean companies actually function. You have that knowledge." Jada's immediately suspicious. "This sounds like you're inventing a job to keep me busy." "It's not charity. It's strategy." Do-hyun pulls out his phone, shows her a presentation deck about international expansion. "I'm not interested in managing your feelings or making you feel useful. I'm interested in succeeding, and success requires people who can navigate the legitimate business world without looking like criminals playing dress-up. You can do that. Most of my people can't." The blunt assessment is oddly compelling. Marcus had always framed his requests as favors, making her feel like she was being allowed to help rather than genuinely needed. Do-hyun is presenting a business problem and positioning her as the solution. What would the job actually involve? Right now, helping me negotiate a partnership with a European luxury brand that wants Korean distribution. They're wary because they've heard rumors about my organization. I need someone who can present the legitimate side of the business without triggering their due diligence alarms. Later, probably establishing international partnerships, vetting potential collaborators, and structuring deals that hold up to regulatory scrutiny. And if I mess up? If I fail spectacularly at negotiating and damage your reputation, then I'll have learned something valuable about your limitations and will adjust accordingly. Do-hyun's expression doesn't change. "But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're considerably more competent than your ex-boyfriend convinced you to believe." The comment is so precisely aimed at her core wound that Jada actually steps back. "How do you know about?" Yoonghwa doesn't need to be told things explicitly. "And I'm observant. You have all the behavioral patterns of someone who's been systematically undermined. The hypervigilance, the need to over-explain your reasoning, the way you brace for dismissal before you've even finished speaking. I recognize it because my father used the same techniques before I was old enough to fight back." Do-hyun's voice remains even, but something dangerous flickers in his eyes. "The difference is I don't use other people's insecurities as leverage. I find it inefficient." The revelation, both of his own history and his apparent policy, creates an unexpected moment of solidarity. Here's someone who understands the architecture of psychological control, not abstractly, but intimately. "When does this job start?" "Friday. You'll have 3 days to review the materials, understand the products, and prepare your approach. Yoonghwa will arrange security for the meeting, but once we're in the room, you're leading. I'll be there to sign whatever you recommend, but the negotiation is yours." "Why give me that much authority?" "Because if you fail, I need to know it's genuine failure, not you holding back because you're afraid of making mistakes." Do-hyun's slight smile returns. "And because watching people rise to responsibility tells me more about them than watching them follow orders ever could." Jada considers the offer. The risk of failure, the possibility of success, the strange gift of being trusted with something real instead of being protected from everything challenging. "Okay, I'll do it. But I need actual information, finances, product specs, distribution challenges, everything. No sanitized versions. I wouldn't insult you with sanitized versions. You're not a child to be protected from complexity. Do-hyun extends his hand for another formal handshake. Welcome to your new position as Strategic Partnerships Director. The pay is considerable, the work is real, and the stakes are higher than you're probably comfortable with. Sounds perfect. As Jada leaves with Yoonghwa, she feels something she hasn't felt in years, anticipation. Not the dread of waiting for the other shoe to drop, but genuine curiosity about what she might be capable of when someone expects competence instead of managing her inadequacy. The night Marcus told her she'd never succeed without his connections, she'd believed him. She'd internalized the idea that her achievements were actually his generosity, her skills only valuable as extensions of his influence. But Do-hyun isn't interested in her gratitude or her dependence. He's interested in her competence. And that distinction, being valued for what she can do rather than for how well she performs feels like oxygen after years of slow suffocation. Yoonghwa must notice something in her expression because she says, "Feeling better? Feeling useful. Is that the same thing?" Sometimes. Yoonghwa navigates through Samcheong's narrow streets with practiced ease. But be careful. Do-hyun respects competence, but his world doesn't tolerate weakness. The moment you show vulnerability, someone will weaponize it. Including him? Yoonghwa considers this carefully. He won't weaponize vulnerability against you directly. But his enemies will, and he won't always be able to protect you from consequences. That's not cruelty. That's the reality of the life he leads. People close to him become targets. It's unavoidable. They're nearly back to the apartment when Yoonghwa's phone buzzes. Her expression shifts, something dark crossing her features. "We need to go up immediately. There's been a delivery." The apartment's entrance is blocked by Do-hyun's security team, their presence grim. On the pristine marble counter sits a vase of white lilies, funeral flowers in Korean culture, with a card propped against the glass. Yoonghwa reads it first, her jaw tightening. Then she hands it to Jada. The message is in English, written in a handwriting Jada recognizes with the same visceral dread she'd feel recognizing a predator's growl. "Seoul looks good on you. We should talk about your new friends. I've missed our conversations. Marcus has found her." The room tilts slightly, and Jada grips the counter to steady herself. 2 years. She'd spent 2 years learning to trust her instincts again, to believe that her perceptions were valid, to remember that she was capable of existing without constant validation or correction. And now Marcus is here, in Seoul, sending flowers that represent death and cards that sound like affection but mean control. Yoonghwa is already on the phone with Do-hyun, her voice clipped and professional. But Jada barely hears the conversation over the sound of her own breathing, which has gone shallow and fast. She recognizes the edges of a panic attack, the physiological response she'd worked months to understand and manage. She sits on the floor, not because she's collapsing, but because her therapist taught her that sometimes fighting the panic makes it worse. Ground yourself. Name 5 things you can see. The marble floor, the lilies, Yoonghwa's tactical boots, the river view, her own hands. For things you can touch. The cold floor, her own sleeve, her phone in her pocket, the edge of the counter. 3 things you can hear. Yoonghwa's voice, the air conditioning, traffic from the street below. 2 things you can smell. The lily's sickly sweetness, Yoonghwa's subtle perfume. 1 thing you can taste. The coffee bitterness still coating her tongue. By the time Do-hyun arrives 20 minutes later, Jada has breathed her way through the worst of the panic. She's sitting on the couch, Yoonghwa beside her in silent solidarity, when he walks in with 3 additional security personnel. He reads the card without expression, then looks at Jada with that same assessing directness she's beginning to recognize. "Tell me about Marcus." Not "Are you okay?" Not "How did he find you?" Just the practical question that gets to the heart of the threat. Jada finds this oddly steadying. "Marcus was my boyfriend for 2 years. He's a lawyer in New York, specializes in corporate mergers, extremely charming in public and systematically cruel in private." The words come out steadier than she expects. "He didn't hit me. He was much more sophisticated than that. He convinced me that my judgment was faulty, that my emotional reactions were excessive, that my professional successes were actually his connections making me look good. By the end, I couldn't trust my own perceptions." Do-hyun listens without interrupting, and Jada sees recognition in his eyes. the understanding of someone who knows exactly what she's describing. When I finally left, I did it carefully, documented everything, transferred money he didn't monitor, applied for jobs in Korea without telling him. I thought I'd been careful enough. Obviously not. How would he have found you? Do-hyun's question is strategic, not accusatory. Social media, probably. I changed my accounts, but some people from my old life still follow me. He's good at seeming concerned rather than controlling. He could have reached out to mutual friends, said he was worried about me, gotten them to share information without realizing they were helping him stalk me. Yoonghwa pulls up Marcus's LinkedIn profile on her tablet. There he is, looking expensive and trustworthy, his profile describing him as a relationship-oriented professional who values authentic connection. The irony would be funny if it weren't so sickening. He arrived in Seoul yesterday. One of Do-hyun's security team reports. Staying at the Park Hyatt, told the concierge he's here for business meetings and personal reconnection. He's been asking about you at your old translation agency and your previous apartment. What does he want? Do-hyun asks Jada directly. Control. Proof that I can't survive without him. To convince me, or convince himself, that my leaving was temporary insanity rather than permanent choice. Jada meets Do-hyun's eyes. He's not dangerous the way your enemies are dangerous. He won't have me killed, but he'll try to destroy my sense of reality until I believe I need him to function. That is dangerous. Do-hyun's voice carries something Jada hasn't heard from him before. Anger, tightly controlled but unmistakable. Different from physical threats, but dangerous. Possibly worse. The validation, the fact that he doesn't minimize or dismiss the threat, makes something in Jada's chest unclench. Marcus had always told her she was overreacting, being dramatic, making mountains out of molehills. But Do-hyun looks at her description of psychological warfare and recognizes it as the weapon it is. We'll monitor his movements, Do-hyun says, shifting into operational mode. Document everything he does. If he makes contact, record it. If he escalates to physical proximity, my people will intervene. But here's what you need to understand. He crouches to be at eye level with her, his expression serious. This kind of threat can't be eliminated the way business threats can be eliminated. I can't make him disappear without creating legal complications that affect you. So we document, we establish patterns, and we build a case that protects you through legitimate channels. Why not just threaten him? Show him you're more powerful and make him leave. Because men like Marcus don't respond to direct threats, they respond to perceived weakness. If I threaten him, he'll see you as someone who needs protection, which confirms his belief that you can't survive without male authority. If we build a legal case and have him arrested for stalking, you prove you can protect yourself using systems and strategy. Which one teaches him the lesson that actually keeps you safe long-term? The answer surprises Jada because it's not about Do-hyun's power, it's about hers. He's not offering to be her shield. He's offering to help her build her own armor. The distinction matters. What do I need to do? First, you don't communicate with him under any circumstances. No responses, no explanations, no attempts to reason with him. Every interaction gives him openings to manipulate. Do-hyun stands, pulling out his phone. Second, you continue with your normal activities, the partnership negotiation on Friday, your therapy sessions, your life. We don't let him dictate your behavior through fear. Third, you trust that my people are between you and him. He doesn't get close without our knowledge. Yoonghwa adds, and you remember that you survived him once already. You identified the toxicity, planned your escape, and rebuilt your life in a foreign country. You're not the same person who was vulnerable to his manipulation. You're stronger than you were, and he's operating on outdated information about who you are. The reminder helps. Jada had left New York terrified and depleted, yes, but she'd left. She'd trusted her instincts enough to act on them, even when Marcus's voice in her head told her she was making a mistake. She'd rebuilt from nothing once. She could defend what she'd built now. Okay. Jada stands, straightening her shoulders. Then let's make sure the documentation is thorough. And let's make sure I'm ready for Friday's negotiation. If Marcus thinks I'm going to fall apart because he's here, he's going to be disappointed. Do-hyun's slight smile returns. That's the response I was hoping for. That night, alone in her temporary apartment with Yoonghwa stationed outside, Jada thinks about the day's dual revelations, that she's capable of more than she'd believed, and that her past isn't as buried as she'd hoped. Marcus's reappearance feels like a test of everything she's learned. Can she be strong without being isolated? Can she accept help without surrendering autonomy? Can she trust her judgment when someone who systematically undermined it wants back into her life? The answers aren't clear yet. But for the first time, she's confident they exist, and that she's capable of finding them. Because Do-hyun hasn't treated her like someone who needs saving from herself. He's treated her like someone who needs resources and support to save herself. Yoonghwa hasn't managed her emotions or dismissed her fear. She's validated the threat and helped strategize responses. These people, dangerous, complicated, operating in morally gray spaces, are somehow giving her more room to be whole than Marcus ever did while claiming to love her. They're expecting her competence while acknowledging her wounds. They're offering protection without demanding dependence. Maybe that's what recovery actually looks like. Not the absence of threats, but the presence of people who believe you're capable of facing them. Friday arrives with the weight of multiple pressures converging. The European luxury brand meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. at a private room in the Four Seasons. Marcus has been seen twice near the building where Jada's old translation agency operated, always maintaining plausible deniability, just a tourist, just exploring the neighborhood. And Do-hyun's security team has identified 3 separate surveillance attempts on Jada's current apartment, all from rival organizations testing Do-hyun's protection protocols. Jada dresses carefully, a tailored navy suit that reads professional without trying too hard, minimal jewelry, her hair in a style that's polished but not severe. Yoonghwa helps her review the negotiation materials one final time while the security team sweeps the route to the hotel. Remember, Yoonghwa says, they're going to be looking for reasons to disqualify Do-hyun as a partner. Your job is to be so thoroughly professional that they can't justify their prejudices. You're not representing yourself. You're representing the possibility that his organization can operate legitimately. No pressure then. Considerable pressure, which you'll handle because you're extremely competent and they don't know enough to underestimate you yet. Yoonghwa's confidence is matter-of-fact rather than encouraging, which somehow makes it more believable. Also, Do-hyun will be there, but he's instructed his people that you lead. If the clients try to direct questions to him, he'll redirect to you. Trust that. The drive to the Four Seasons is uneventful, but Jada's aware of the multiple security vehicles maintaining invisible perimeters. Do-hyun meets her in the private elevator that accesses the hotel's executive floors, his suit impeccable, his expression neutral. Nervous, he asks. Terrified. Also prepared. Can both be true? Both should be true. Confidence without fear is arrogance. Fear without confidence is paralysis. You're in the productive middle. He adjusts his cufflinks, a gesture she's beginning to recognize as his tell for focus. They'll test you in the first 5 minutes. How you handle that determines whether we're negotiating or being dismissed. What kind of test? Probably subtle prejudice disguised as concern. Questions about your background, your qualifications, whether you have authority to negotiate. White men of a certain age default to assuming young women, especially women of color, are assistants rather than decision-makers. Your response needs to correct them without making them defensive. The casual way he names the dynamic, not dismissing it or getting defensive on her behalf, just identifying it as a tactical challenge to navigate, helps Jada shift from anxiety to strategy. This is just another problem to solve. The clients are already in the private dining room when they arrive. Christoph Bauer, the CEO of Lux and Tradition, a 60-year-old German with expensive glasses and assessing eyes. Marie Dupont, their director of international expansion, sharp-suited and watchful. And James Morrison, their legal counsel, British and clearly skeptical. Do-hyun makes introductions with perfect formality. Christoph Marie James, this is Jada Knox, our strategic partnerships director. She'll be leading today's discussion. I'm here to sign what she recommends and answer any questions about our organizational structure. The slight pause before Christoph responds tells Jada everything. He'd expected to negotiate with Do-hyun directly, and the presence of a young black woman in a leadership role has disrupted his assumptions. She can see him recalibrating, trying to determine if this is legitimate or if she's decorative misdirection. Ms. Knox, Christoph begins, his English accented but perfect. Perhaps you could tell us about your background? We like to understand the experience of the people we're negotiating with. There it is, the subtle demand for her credentials, the implication that she needs to justify her presence. Jada keeps her expression pleasant and her response direct. Of course, I spent 5 years in corporate strategy at Deloitte, specializing in international market entry and cross-cultural business development. I've negotiated partnerships in 12 countries, with particular focus on Asian markets. I moved to Seoul 6 months ago to work more directly with East Asian business culture, which operates quite differently from Western models. Do-hyun's organization approached me because they need someone who can navigate both worlds, someone who understands how European businesses assess risk and how Korean businesses build trust. That's my value proposition. The response establishes credibility without being defensive, and she watches Marie's expression shift from skeptical to interested. James, however, leans forward slightly. And your authority in these negotiations? We need to be certain that agreements reached here will be honored by, he glances at Do-hyun, the broader organization. The implication is clear. Can a woman really speak for a man like Do-hyun? Jada doesn't look to Do-hyun for confirmation. That would undermine everything. Instead, she meets James's eyes directly. I have full authority to negotiate terms, structure agreements, and commit organizational resources up to $50 million USD. Anything beyond that requires additional board approval, which is standard for any significant partnership. Do-hyun's here because your due diligence raised questions about organizational legitimacy, and you deserve to meet the person whose name is on the paperwork. But the negotiation itself, the terms, the structure, the implementation timeline, that's my domain. If you're not comfortable with that, we can reschedule for a time when you are. The subtle challenge, either accept her authority or admit they're not serious about negotiating, shifts the dynamic. Christoph leans back, reassessing, and then nods slightly. Very well. Let's discuss what you're offering. The next 90 minutes are the most intellectually demanding of Jada's life. The clients probe every aspect of the proposed partnership. Distribution networks, quality control measures, regulatory compliance, financial transparency. They're looking for evidence that Do-hyun's organization is sophisticated enough for legitimate business and clean enough to not contaminate their brand. Jada had prepared for this by assuming worst-case skepticism. She has documentation for everything, financial audits from reputable firms, regulatory compliance certifications, testimonials from other international partners, detailed logistics plans that account for every potential complication. When they ask about organized crime connections, she doesn't deflect or get offended. Lux and Tradition operates in multiple countries, some of which have complex relationships between business and political power. You've probably navigated situations where legitimate business intersects with less transparent power structures. Korea is no different. Connections exist, histories matter, reputations carry weight. Our organization has those connections, yes. But we're offering you access to distribution networks and market relationships that would take you 5 years to build independently. The question isn't whether we're pure by some absolute standard. The question is whether we can deliver what we're promising while meeting your compliance requirements. I believe we can. These documents show how. It's a gamble, acknowledging the complexity rather than denying it, but framing it as pragmatic reality rather than moral failing. Marie actually smiles slightly, apparently appreciating the honesty. And if your organization faces legal challenges? If Do-hyun's name appears in connection with investigations? Then our contract includes provisions that protect you. Clear separation between our legitimate partnerships and any other operations, indemnification clauses, termination rights that don't penalize you financially. You're not marrying the entire organization. You're partnering with the specific division I run, which operates with full transparency and accountability. If anything threatens that transparency, you walk away clean. The question and answer continues, but Jada can feel the shift. They're not trying to disqualify her anymore. They're actually negotiating. Christoph starts asking about implementation timelines. Marie discusses marketing strategies. James requests additional documentation, but seems satisfied with the protection structures. Do-hyun, true to his word, says almost nothing. When they try to direct questions to him, he simply redirects. Ms. Knox handles the operational details. I trust her recommendations. It's not deference, it's delegation, and the distinction matters. He's powerful enough to delegate significant authority, which actually increases Jada's credibility rather than undermining it. By 4 o'clock, they have the framework of an agreement. Lux and Tradition will partner with Do-hyun's organization for Korean distribution, starting with a limited product line and expanding based on performance metrics. Jada's team will handle all operational details, with quarterly reviews and clear exit clauses if either party isn't satisfied. Christoph shakes her hand with genuine respect. You surprised us, Ms. Knox. We expected. He trails off, apparently realizing that finishing the sentence would reveal the prejudices they'd arrived with. You expected someone different, Jada finishes calmly. Most people do. It's why I'm good at this job. People underestimate me, which gives me strategic advantages they don't anticipate until it's too late. Marie laughs outright. I like her. Let's make this partnership work. As they leave the Four Seasons, Do-hyun maintains his neutral expression until they're in the private elevator. Then he allows himself a slight smile. Well done. You not only closed the deal, you made them feel like partnering with us was their idea. It was their idea. I just made it easier for them to admit it. Jada feels adrenaline leaving her system, replaced by bone-deep satisfaction. She'd done this. Not perfectly, not without fear, but competently and successfully. Thank you for actually letting me lead. I know that wasn't easy for your reputation. My reputation is enhanced by having competent people in my organization. And you were right earlier. People underestimating you is strategically valuable. They'll keep making that mistake, and you'll keep using it. Do-hyun's phone buzzes, and his expression shifts immediately. We have a problem. Yoonghwa is waiting in the parking garage, her posture grim. Marcus approached the Four Seasons front desk an hour ago, asking if Jada Knox was meeting here today. Security declined to confirm, but he waited in the lobby for 30 minutes before leaving. The satisfaction from the successful negotiation evaporates, replaced by cold awareness. Marcus isn't just tracking her. He's actively trying to intercept her, to engineer chance encounters that he can spin as concern or coincidence. How did he know I'd be here? Jada asks, though she's already guessing the answer. He's been monitoring Do-hyun's public calendar. This hotel hosts a lot of high-level business meetings. He probably guessed that if you're working for Do-hyun, you'd eventually have meetings here. It's not sophisticated surveillance, it's just determination and pattern recognition. Do-hyun's expression has gone cold in a way Jada hasn't seen before. This isn't chance. This is escalation. He's not just tracking you, he's announcing that he can find you anywhere. That he's committed to wearing down your defenses through persistence. So what do? Jada hears the frustration in her own voice. I can't live my life accommodating his stalking. No, you can't. So we accelerate the legal strategy. Do-hyun pulls out his phone, already typing messages. My lawyers will file for a restraining order, citing the flowers, the proximity incidents, and the pattern of following you to Korea. We document everything, security footage from today, testimony from the hotel staff, the messages from your mutual friends he's contacted. We make his persistence legally actionable instead of romantically persistent. That could take weeks. And it might not even be granted. Restraining orders for international stalking are complicated. Which is why we have a backup plan. Do-hyun's tone carries something dangerous now. If legal channels don't move fast enough, my people arrange a conversation with Marcus. Very direct, very clear, explaining why continued contact with you is against his interests. We don't threaten violence. We simply make it abundantly clear that his actions are being monitored, documented, and that any escalation will have consequences that affect his professional reputation and legal standing. Jada should probably be uncomfortable with the implication of threats and intimidation. But Marcus has spent weeks systematically violating her boundaries, using plausible deniability and social norms to stalk her across continents. Legal systems are slow, and her fear is immediate. Would that actually work? She asks. It works on people who care about consequences. If Marcus is rational under his obsession, he'll recognize that continuing is more costly than letting go. If he's not rational, Do-hyun's expression hardens. Then we escalate to more aggressive protection measures. But let's start with making consequences clear and seeing how he responds. Yoonghwa adds, and in the meantime, we vary your routines, increase your security presence, and make it harder for him to predict your movements. He's relying on patterns. We break those patterns. The conversation continues as they drive back to Gangnam, but Jada is only half listening. She's thinking about the afternoon's dual realities. The exhilaration of professional success followed immediately by the drain of personal threat. It feels metaphorical for her entire situation. Every step forward in rebuilding her competence is shadowed by reminders of the person who convinced her she had none. But here's what Marcus doesn't know. She's not the same woman he manipulated 2 years ago. That woman had been isolated, dependent on his validation, uncertain of her own perceptions. This version of her negotiated million-dollar partnerships while he sat in hotel lobbies, hoping to engineer encounters. This version has allies who believe in her competence and enemies who take her seriously as a threat. This version has learned that strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being knocked down and getting back up with better strategies. That night, Jada video calls her therapist through encrypted channels. Dr. Chin listens to the week's events with her characteristic calm, asking questions that help Jada process rather than directing her toward specific conclusions. How do you feel about accepting Do-hyun's protection? Dr. Chin asks. Conflicted. It feels too similar to depending on Marcus, even though I know intellectually it's different. What makes it different? Jada considers this carefully. Do-hyun isn't trying to manage my emotions or convince me I'm incapable. He's offering resources while expecting me to use them competently. Marcus pretended to help while actually undermining my confidence, so I'd need him more. The mechanics look similar, a powerful man offering assistance, but the intentions and outcomes are opposite. That's an important distinction. One is support that increases your agency. The other was support that decreased it. Dr. Chin pauses. And how do you feel about the negotiation today? Terrified beforehand, competent during, proud afterward, and then angry that Marcus's appearance immediately overshadowed that pride. The anger makes sense. You achieved something significant, and his stalking forced you to immediately shift from celebration to defense. That's part of how abusers maintain control. They don't let you enjoy victories without contaminating them with fear. Dr. Chen's expression softens. But here's what I notice. You felt proud before Marcus intruded. That pride existed independent of his attempts to undermine it. He can't take that from you unless you let him. The session ends with homework. Write down today's professional success in detail, separate from the stalking incident. Remember it as its own complete experience, not as something that Marcus's actions diminished. Practice holding both realities simultaneously, that she's capable and successful, and that someone from her past is trying to undermine that truth. Don't let his narrative become the dominant one. As Jada prepares for bed, she thinks about the child in the painting at Do-hyun's gallery, arms raised to the sun, alone but not abandoned. Solitude chosen rather than loneliness imposed. She's beginning to understand what Do-hyun meant about the distinction. She'd thought healing meant being strong enough to not need anyone. But maybe it actually means being strong enough to choose who to trust, to accept support without surrendering autonomy, to be vulnerable with people who've earned that vulnerability rather than withdrawing from everyone out of fear. Marcus taught her that power meant control and that caring meant dependence. But this week has taught her something different. That power can mean competence, that caring can coexist with boundaries, and that the people who genuinely support her growth are the ones who expect her strength rather than managing her weakness. These are lessons she couldn't have learned without risk. And as she falls asleep in an apartment protected by people who believe she's capable of protecting herself, Jada realizes that maybe she's finally learning to trust her own judgment. The thing Marcus worked so hard to destroy, and that she's working even harder to rebuild. The restraining order is filed on Monday, and by Wednesday, Marcus has responded through his own lawyers with a letter claiming Jada is mentally unstable and that his presence in Seoul is purely coincidental business travel. The legal warfare has begun, and it's exactly as exhausting as Jada feared. But Do-hyun's prediction proves accurate. The filed paperwork and documented evidence makes Marcus's behavior legally actionable rather than romantically persistent. Hotel security footage shows him waiting in lobbies Jada frequents. The flower delivery is traced to his credit card. Messages to mutual friends are preserved and presented as evidence of his attempts to locate her despite her clear desire for no contact. The case isn't won yet, but it exists, official, documented, undeniable. Meanwhile, Jada's work with the Lux and Tradition partnership moves forward. She's building a team, establishing protocols, and discovering that she's actually good at this, not just competent but talented. The satisfaction of solving complex logistical problems, of negotiating competing interests, of building systems that work efficiently gives her something Marcus's stalking can't touch. Purpose that exists independent of anyone's opinion of her. Yoonghwa has become an unlikely friend, their relationship evolving beyond bodyguard and protected asset. Over coffee one morning, Yoonghwa shares her own story. How she met her husband in university, how they'd planned a simple life, how rival gang violence had killed him for nothing more than being in the wrong place during a territorial dispute. Do-hyun found me 6 months after Jae-sung died. Yoonghwa says, her expression distant. I was planning revenge, stupid, suicidal revenge. Do-hyun offered me something better. Purpose that channeled the rage instead of letting it destroy me. He gave me training, gave me work, gave me a way to use my anger to protect other people instead of throwing my life away on vengeance that wouldn't bring Jae-sung back. Do you still want revenge? Jada asks carefully. Every day. But I've learned that revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Revenge is about making someone suffer. Justice is about preventing future suffering. Do-hyun taught me the difference. Yoonghwa meets Jada's eyes directly. Marcus wants revenge on you for leaving. He wants you to suffer for choosing yourself over him. But you're building justice, systems and boundaries that prevent him from hurting you or anyone else. That's the stronger choice. The conversation stays with Jada because it reframes everything. She's not just defending herself from Marcus. She's establishing patterns that prove manipulation and stalking have consequences. She's becoming evidence that women can escape emotional abuse and rebuild successfully. She's demonstrating that perpetrators don't get to rewrite history or reestablish control simply through persistence. That's not just survival. That's transformation. 2 weeks after the restraining order filing, Do-hyun's people report that Marcus has changed tactics. He's no longer attempting proximity encounters. Instead, he's reaching out to Jada's former colleagues in New York, telling them he's concerned about her mental health, suggesting that she's involved with dangerous people in Korea, positioning himself as the worried ex-boyfriend trying to save her from herself. It's sophisticated and infuriating. He's weaponizing concern, making himself the hero and her the victim who doesn't know she needs saving. Jada's initial response is panic. What if people believe him? What if her professional reputation gets contaminated by his narrative? But then she remembers Dr. Chen's homework. She has evidence of her competence. The partnership with Lux and Tradition is public and successful. Her professional network in Seoul is growing. She's not the isolated, uncertain woman Marcus knew 2 years ago. Let him tell his stories, Do-hyun says when she expresses concern. Stories only work when there's no competing narrative. We have evidence, contracts, professional relationships, documented success. His concern trolling can't compete with your actual achievements. People who matter will see through it. And people who don't see through it weren't going to support you anyway. Marcus is identifying who was never really on your side. That's useful information. The harsh pragmatism should sting, but instead it clarifies. Jada had spent so much energy trying to convince everyone that she was okay, that she'd made the right choice leaving, that she wasn't the unstable person Marcus claimed. But that was still letting him define the terms. The alternative is simply living well, building tangibly, and trusting that evidence speaks louder than manipulation. The crisis comes 3 weeks after the engagement party incident, when Yoonghwa's phone buzzes during their morning coffee. Marcus just checked into the Marriott in Gangnam. That's 2 blocks from your apartment. The proximity feels like a violation even though technically he's not breaking any laws yet. The restraining order hasn't been formally granted, just filed. Do-hyun's legal team is still navigating international jurisdictional complexities. He's escalating because the legal strategy is working. Do-hyun says during an emergency meeting in his office. He knows once the order is granted, his access becomes criminally restricted. So he's making his move now, while he still technically can. What move? Jada's voice sounds steadier than she feels. Contact. He'll engineer an encounter that seems coincidental, try to talk to you, probably record the conversation to prove you're willing to engage with him. Then he'll use that recording to argue against the restraining order, claiming you're still in a relationship or that his presence doesn't distress you. The manipulation is so predictable it's almost boring. Marcus had used similar tactics throughout their relationship, creating situations where Jada's reasonable responses could be reframed as proof of her instability or inconsistency. She'd learned to second-guess every reaction, uncertain whether her feelings were valid or whether she was being too sensitive like he always claimed. But she's not uncertain anymore. So we don't give him that encounter, Jada says. I stay in secure locations, vary my movements, and if he approaches, I immediately leave without engaging. No words, no acknowledgement, no reaction he can weaponize. Yoonghwa nods approvingly. Exactly. Gray rock technique. Be so boring and unresponsive that he gets nothing from the interaction. The plan seems solid until Thursday evening, when Jada is leaving a follow-up meeting with Lux and Tradition at their temporary Seoul offices. Yoonghwa is with her, along with 2 additional security personnel. They're walking toward the parking garage when Jada sees him. Marcus, standing near the building entrance, looking exactly like he always did. Expensive suit, calculated casual posture. That smile that used to make her feel special and now makes her skin crawl. He's not approaching directly, just present, visible. A reminder that he can find her anywhere. Yoonghwa immediately positions herself between Jada and Marcus, her hand moving subtly toward her concealed weapon. The other security personnel flank them, creating a moving barrier. But Marcus doesn't approach, he just watches, his expression one of hurt concern, as if Jada's the one being unreasonable. "Jada," he calls out, his voice carrying that familiar tone of gentle correction. "Can we please just talk? I came all this way because I'm worried about you." Every instinct screams at her to respond, to explain, to defend herself, to make him understand why she left and why he needs to leave her alone. That's the conditioning talking. The 2 years of training were not responding to Marcus meant punishment through sulking, passive aggression, or manufactured crises. But she's learned new responses now. Jada doesn't speak, doesn't make eye contact, doesn't acknowledge his existence. She simply continues walking toward the parking garage, Yoonghwa and the security team maintaining their protective formation. Her hands are shaking, her breathing shallow, but she's moving forward. "This is what they've done to you," Marcus calls after her, his voice rising slightly. "They've isolated you, made you afraid of people who actually care about you. This isn't you, Jada. Come back to yourself." The accusation that she's been brainwashed, that she's not acting like herself, is so perfectly inverted that it's almost impressive. He's the one who isolated her. He's the one who made her afraid to trust her instincts. He's the one who spent 2 years convincing her that herself was somehow flawed and needed his constant correction. But she doesn't say any of this. She just gets in the car. As they drive away, Jada allows herself to shake, to feel the adrenaline and fear she'd suppressed to maintain composure. Yoonghwa doesn't tell her to calm down or minimize the encounter. She just says, "You did perfectly." No engagement, no reaction, no ammunition for him to use. "I'm proud of you." The praise breaks something loose, and Jada finds herself crying. Not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of being believed, of having her response validated instead of criticized. Marcus had always made her feel like her fear was her fault, like her distress was overreaction. But Yoonghwa is treating her terror as reasonable and her composed response as an achievement. "He'll probably try again," Yoonghwa continues. "Men like him escalate when gray rock works because it removes their control. But each time you don't engage, you're building documentation that shows you want no contact. That strengthens the restraining order case. It feels like he's winning, though. He's here, disrupting my life, making me afraid in my own city. He's not winning. He's flailing. Think about what just happened. He came to Seoul, tracked you down, engineered a dramatic encounter, and you walked past him like he was furniture. That's not him winning. That's you refusing to play his game." Yoonghwa pulls up to Do-hyun's office building instead of the apartment. Do-hyun wants to see you. He has a proposal. Inside, Do-hyun's office is dark except for the city lights from the floor-to-ceiling windows. He's standing at the glass, looking out at Seoul's neon geometry, and doesn't turn immediately when Jada enters. "Yoonghwa sent me the security footage," he says finally. "You handled that better than most people handle trained negotiators. No reaction, no engagement, perfect gray rock execution. It didn't feel perfect. It felt like running away. There's a difference between running from something and refusing to participate in something." Now Do-hyun does turn, and his expression is serious. Marcus wants a confrontation because confrontation gives him opportunities to manipulate, to record your words, to claim the relationship is ongoing. You denied him that opportunity. That's strategic, not cowardly. He's going to keep trying, though. Probably. Which is why I'm offering you a choice. Do-hyun walks to his desk, pulls out a folder. "My legal team has fast-tracked the restraining order through some connections in the Korean court system. It'll be granted tomorrow, with international reciprocity that makes Marcus's presence within 200 meters of you legally actionable in Korea. The moment he violates it, he can be arrested and deported." That's fast. How? "I have relationships with judges who understand domestic violence cases. They reviewed the evidence and agreed this qualifies as stalking with credible threat." Marcus's presence in Korea combined with his documented history of emotional manipulation convinced them. Do-hyun slides the folder across the desk. But here's the choice. We can rely on legal enforcement alone, which is clean but potentially slow if Marcus is strategic about violations. Or we can combine legal protection with a very direct conversation where my people make it clear to Marcus that continued pursuit has immediate, non-legal consequences. Jada understands what he's offering: the threat of violence or intimidation that exists outside official channels. It should horrify her. Maybe it should make her question Do-hyun's methods or her own moral boundaries. But she's tired of being afraid. She's exhausted from Marcus's manipulation, from the way he uses social norms and plausible deniability to stalk her while maintaining victim status. Legal systems are just, but they're slow. And every day Marcus walks free is another day Jada can't fully live her life. What would this conversation involve? Nothing that leaves marks or creates legal liability. Just a clear explanation that his continued presence in Seoul is unacceptable, that every action is being monitored, and that men who stalk women in my city find their professional and personal lives become complicated in ways they didn't anticipate. We don't threaten him directly, we simply make visible the consequences that already exist for his behavior. Would it work? On someone rational who understands risk assessment? Yes. On someone obsessive who's convinced himself this is romance rather than stalking? Do-hyun's expression is skeptical. Maybe. But even if it doesn't stop him, it accelerates his decision-making. Either he leaves Korea voluntarily, or he escalates in ways that give us clearer legal justification for intervention. Jada sits with the decision. Dr. Chin would probably want her to process this carefully, to consider what accepting Do-hyun's extra-legal help means for her moral boundaries. But Dr. Chin isn't being stalked across continents by someone who's weaponizing concern and social norms. I want both, Jada says finally. The restraining order for legal protection, and your people making Marcus understand that Seoul isn't safe for him. Not because I want revenge, but because I want this over. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to stop having my achievements overshadowed by fear of when he'll appear next. Do-hyun nods slowly. That's fair. But understand, once we take this step, you're fully committed to my world. Not just protected by it, but complicit in its methods. There's no going back to pretending you don't know how power works outside official channels. I think that ship sailed when I kissed you at your engagement party. Jada manages a weak smile. My illusions about operating entirely within polite society ended the moment I involved myself in your assassination attempt. True. Then let's make this official. Do-hyun extends his hand for another formal handshake. My organization will handle Marcus through legal and practical channels. You'll be safe, and he'll learn that stalking has consequences. In return, you continue building the legitimate side of my operations and accept that protection sometimes requires methods that wouldn't appear in business ethics textbooks. Jada takes his hand, feeling the strange weight of choosing pragmatism over purity. She's accepting help that comes with moral complexity, protection that involves intimidation, safety purchased through means she wouldn't have considered a month ago. But she's also choosing to live without fear. She's choosing to trust that some people, even dangerous, morally complicated people, can be more trustworthy than those who weaponize virtue while perpetrating harm. Maybe that's what growth actually looks like. Not becoming pure enough to avoid difficult choices, but becoming strong enough to make them with eyes open. The restraining order is served to Marcus on Friday morning at his hotel. Do-hyun's people deliver it personally, along with a very quiet conversation in the hotel lobby that lasts 7 minutes. Jada doesn't ask what was said, and Do-hyun doesn't offer details. But Marcus checks out of the Marriott that afternoon and books a flight to New York departing Sunday. The surveillance footage from the conversation shows Marcus's expression shifting from confident to uncertain to something approaching actual fear. Whatever was communicated, it worked. He understands the situation now, Do-hyun reports. He was operating under the assumption that you had no real protection, that he could wear you down through persistence the way he did before. Learning that's not the case has adjusted his risk assessment. Will he actually leave? My people will ensure he boards that flight. And we'll maintain monitoring for the next 6 months to verify he doesn't attempt to return. Do-hyun's tone is matter-of-fact. He's not gone forever, but he's gone from your immediate environment. That's the victory we're claiming. The victory feels hollow at first. Jada had imagined this moment would bring relief, celebration, maybe vindication. Instead, she mostly feels exhausted. 2 years of relationship damage, 6 months of rebuilding, 3 weeks of acute stalking. It all ends with a quiet conversation in a hotel lobby and a plane ticket. But as the weekend passes without Marcus sightings, without flowers or messages or engineered encounters, Jada begins to notice something changing. She sleeps through the night without waking to check security cameras. She goes to her Tuesday therapy session without scanning crowds for his face. She eats lunch at a cafe and actually tastes the food instead of maintaining constant vigilance. The fear is receding, leaving space for something she hasn't felt in years. The simple, uncomplicated experience of existing in the world without constant defensive monitoring. How does it feel? Dr. Chin asks during their session. Strange. Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reappear, or for some new threat to materialize. That hypervigilance served you well when the threat was active. Now you're learning to recalibrate, to recognize when you're actually safe versus when your nervous system is stuck in threat response. How do I know the difference? Dr. Chin smiles. You practice. You notice when you're scanning for danger that isn't there. You remind yourself that you have resources now that you didn't have before: legal protection, skilled security, people who believe you and support your safety. Your past vulnerability doesn't determine your current reality. The homework this week is to do one thing daily that she couldn't do when Marcus was actively stalking her. Eat at a sidewalk cafe without security, take a different route home, browse a bookstore without planning exit strategies. Small acts of reclaiming normal life. Jada discovers that normal life includes the partnership work with Lux and Tradition, which is thriving beyond initial projections. The first shipment arrives ahead of schedule, the marketing campaign resonates with Korean consumers, and the European executives send a message complimenting her team's execution. You've exceeded our expectations, Ms. Knox, Christoph says during their video conference. We'd like to discuss expanding the partnership to Japan and Taiwan, with you leading that expansion. The offer is significant, real professional growth, not charity or fabricated responsibility. Jada negotiates terms with confidence she didn't know she possessed 6 months ago, and by the end of the call, she's secured a 3-year contract with substantial autonomy and compensation that would have seemed impossible when she was translating part-time in Itaewon. Yoonghwa takes her out for celebratory samgyeopsal that evening, and over grilled pork belly and soju, Jada realizes she's laughing. Actually laughing, not performing happiness or forcing normalcy, but experiencing genuine joy from success and friendship and the simple pleasure of good food with someone who gets her. You look different, Yoonghwa observes. Different how? Less like you're braced for impact. More like you're actually here, in this moment, instead of managing threats in your head. The observation hits home because it's accurate. Jada had spent so long in defensive crouch, first from Marcus's manipulation, then from the engagement party fallout, then from his stalking, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to simply inhabit her life rather than constantly protecting herself from it. I think I'm actually healing, Jada says, surprised by her own realization. Not just surviving or coping, but actually getting better. That's what happens when you have space to heal. When you're not constantly re-traumatized or forced to prove you deserve safety. Yoonghwa raises her soju glass. To reconstruction. It's harder than destruction, but it lasts longer. They toast, and Jada thinks about reconstruction, the deliberate process of building something new from damaged materials. She'd thought healing meant erasing damage, becoming the person she was before Marcus. But maybe it actually means becoming someone new. Someone who knows what manipulation looks like and chooses differently. Someone who's experienced vulnerability and learned to protect herself without closing off completely. Someone who's discovered she can be both strong and open-hearted. The next week, Do-hyun invites her to dinner. Not a business meeting, but an actual dinner at a traditional Korean restaurant in Bucheon. It's unexpectedly intimate, just the two of them in a private room with careful service and food that's more art than sustenance. You've done well, Do-hyun says, pouring her tea. The partnership is exceeding projections, your team is solid, and you've handled Marcus's disruption without falling apart. I'm impressed. Coming from you, that's high praise. I don't give empty compliments. They're inefficient. But there's warmth in his expression, something less guarded than his usual neutrality. I'm curious, though, what changed? Between the woman who kissed me at the engagement party and the woman negotiating million-dollar contracts 6 weeks later. Jada considers the question carefully. I stopped trying to be invisible. Marcus taught me that safety meant making myself small, taking up no space, never causing problems. And for a while after leaving him, I kept that pattern, Stay anonymous, don't draw attention, exist quietly. But kissing you at that party was the opposite of invisible. And somehow, surviving the consequences of being seen taught me that visibility isn't the same as vulnerability. I can be known without being controlled. That's the lesson, isn't it? Power isn't about controlling everything. It's about choosing what to engage with and what to dismiss. Do-hyun pauses, seeming to decide something. I told you before that my father used psychological manipulation similar to what Marcus did to you. I didn't tell you that I spent my teenage years convinced I was fundamentally flawed, that my emotional responses were wrong, that I needed to become harder to survive. The confession surprises Jada because Do-hyun doesn't seem like someone who shares personal history casually. What changed? He died when I was 17, and without his voice constantly correcting me, I slowly learned that my instincts weren't wrong. They were just inconvenient to someone who wanted total control. I learned that feeling things deeply wasn't weakness, that caring about people could coexist with being strategic, that I could be both dangerous and decent, depending on what the situation required. Is that why you helped me? Because you recognized the pattern? Partly, but also because you did something brave when bravery would have been easier to avoid. And people who choose courage over convenience are rare enough to protect. Do-hyun meets her eyes directly. I respect you, Jada. Not as a project or a responsibility, but as an equal who's done the hard work of recovering herself from someone who tried to erase her. That's rarer than any business skill. The moment feels weighted with something Jada can't quite name. Not romance exactly, but recognition. Two people who've survived similar damage, acknowledging each other's reconstruction work. It's intimate without being sexual, vulnerable without being weak. So what happens now? Jada asks. Marcus is gone, the partnership is stable, I have actual work that I'm good at. Do I just continue? Build a normal life? Is that what you want? I think so. I wanted to survive for so long that I forgot to consider what thriving might look like. Jada laughs softly. That sounds absurd. It sounds like trauma. When survival is uncertain, you don't plan further ahead than tomorrow. Now you have space for longer timelines. Do-hyun refills both their cups. For what it's worth, I think you should stay in Seoul. Your work is valuable, your life here is becoming substantial, and you've built relationships that support your growth. But that's your decision, not mine. Would you want me to stay? I'd want you to choose what actually serves your well-being, not what you think I want or what seems safer or what avoids difficult feelings. I'd want you to practice the autonomy you've been rebuilding. The answer is frustratingly wise and completely unhelpful for someone used to looking for the right answer in other people's preferences. But it's also exactly what Jada needs to hear, that her choices are hers alone, that no one else's opinion should determine her direction. That night, alone in her apartment with Yoonghwa positioned outside, Jada makes lists. Things she wants: meaningful work, authentic friendships, financial independence, creative expression, the ability to trust herself. Things she has, all of those things, built incrementally over 6 months in Seoul. Things she fears, that it's temporary, that she'll somehow sabotage it, that Marcus was right and she can't maintain success without someone managing her. But that last fear is just his voice, not truth. The evidence contradicts it. She's maintained success specifically by refusing to be managed, by insisting on autonomy, by trusting her judgment even when it led to complicated situations. She tears up the fear list and keeps only the reality. She's in Seoul, she's building something substantial, she has people who respect her competence and support her healing, and for the first time in years, her life feels like it actually belongs to her. 2 months after the engagement party, Jada stands in Do-hyun's gallery at the opening of a new exhibit, contemporary artists exploring themes of reconstruction and identity. Yoonghwa is there, along with Kangdae, who's warmed to Jada after she successfully negotiated a deal he'd thought impossible. Several of her team members from the Lux and Tradition partnership attend, bringing their own networks and treating Jada as a genuine professional rather than Do-hyun's accessory. She's wearing a dress she bought herself, with money she earned through work she's proud of, surrounded by people who know her and like her anyway. Marcus's voice, the one that used to narrate her every decision with criticism and correction, has finally quieted. Do-hyun finds her in front of a sculpture, a human figure reassembling itself from shattered pieces, each crack visible but not hidden, the reconstruction obvious and beautiful. This one's my favorite, Jada says, because it's honest about being broken and rebuilt, because it doesn't pretend the damage didn't happen. The cracks are part of the design now, not something to hide or be ashamed of. She touches the sculpture lightly, feeling the rough edges smoothed into art. I used to think healing meant becoming undamaged. But maybe it just means learning to build with different materials. Wiser materials. Stronger for having been tested. Do-hyun's hand briefly touches her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity rather than possession. You've done well, Jada Knox. Not just survived, but actually built something worth protecting. The compliment settles warmly, and Jada realizes she believes it. Not because Do-hyun said it, but because she has evidence. The partnership, the friendships, the competence she demonstrates daily, the life she's reconstructing with intention rather than desperation. Marcus tried to convince her she was nothing without him. But standing in this gallery, surrounded by people she's earned relationships with, doing work she's genuinely skilled at, Jada knows the truth. She's always been someone. She just needed space away from people who insisted she was nobody to remember that. And remembering that, truly deeply remembering her own substance, might be the most revolutionary act of her entire life. The story doesn't end with romance or dramatic victory. It ends with Jada ordering Samgyeopsal with confidence, laughing at Yoonghwa's terrible jokes, planning next quarter's business strategy, and going home to an apartment that finally feels like hers. It ends with ordinary life reclaimed from someone who tried to steal it, with competence demonstrated rather than granted, with healing chosen deliberately rather than happening accidentally. Some stories end with fireworks. This one ends with peace, hard-won, carefully maintained, and infinitely more valuable than the drama that threatened to consume it. Because peace, Jada has learned, is what you build when you stop letting other people's chaos define your reality. And building it is the most courageous thing she's ever done.